everyone, welcome back to my channel and another tutorial. Today I am super excited to be showing you how to make the Derica handbag by Tobi Stylx. This is the first time I have done one of her patterns, and I tell you, she does not disappoint. This pattern was such a joy to make. It was amazing. I learned some new things with this, and I can't wait to make more of these. So about this bag, it is a drop-in lining. Do not be scared of the drop-in lining. It is not that hard. The way this bag is made, the drop-in lining is actually fairly simple. But if you do not like drop-in linings, it would be very easy to convert this into a birthing bag. All you would have to do as we normally do with birthing bags, is leave an opening in the bottom, leave an opening in the pocket, put your lining and your exterior right sides together, sew across the top with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, turn it through the hole, and then top stitch with a 1/8. But this bag is so easy to do as a drop-in lining, and I'll show you how I do that, of course, in this video. So you can definitely do it both ways. Let me show you some of the features of this bag. It's just amazing. So in the pattern, it gives you a choice of doing rolled handles, or you could also do flat handles. It has hidden connectors. On the back, you have a slip pocket with a magnetic snap. On the front, you have a magnetic snap here. I believe that's to give you quick access into your bag if you don't want to do the whole thing. Or you can undo, there's a turn lock here, you open it up, and it has some hidden small zipper pockets here. They're just very small ones. They go to about a hand's worth, I guess. And on the inside, I mean, look at, with the drop-in lining, look how tight that fits in there. It is just so amazing. So you have a decorative zipper pocket on one side and two very large slip pockets on the other. And to get this unique shape, it is held together by magnetic snaps on the side. So if you undo that, look how big this bag opens up. Like, I'm so tempted to keep this one for myself. So I don't know, I just love it. Materials I used in this bag, let me just get this all closed up. So my black vinyl is just the Dakota Marine vinyl from Fabric Fill. This amazing animal print, this is from Galaxy Kustoms. I will put a link down below to where you could get this vinyl. I believe she is going to be getting more if she's all sold out. My hardware is all from Emmaline bags. My zippers and zipper pulls are from Blue Calla Patterns. Interfacing in this bag, I used Decovil Light for the main pieces, and on the bottom I have Peltex. That's really all there is for interfacing in this bag. Oh, and of course my cotton pieces, I have Fuse Lite back to my cotton pieces, which is a woven interfacing. This one does have a lot of raw edge work. As you can see, all along here is raw edges, so I did use Giardini edge paint for these. I did 4 coats of the base coat, a color coat, and then the protecting gloss just to give it that extra, you can see the shine there. I just love Giardini edge paint. What else about this bag? I will put a link down below to where you can get this. It is an affiliate link. And until February 16th, 2022, you can get 10% off of this pattern using the coupon code BEAN10, capital BEAN, and then the number 10. I will put that down below if you want to take advantage of that discount to get this pattern. Thank you, Tobi, for allowing me to do a tutorial on your amazing, beautiful pattern. I can't rave enough about this bag. You will not be disappointed when you make it. So yeah, thanks again, Tobi. And if you like this video and you would like to support my channel, you can always buy me a coffee. I'll put the link down below in the description. And without further ado, let's get to making this bag.
You are going to need some rivets, some piping cording, some cording for your rolled handles, some number 5 zipper tape, 4 magnetic snaps, a turn lock, 4 rectangular rings, and 5 purse feet. Okay, you are going to need 2 pieces of your main flap backed with Decovil Light, 2 of your handle pieces, your zipper overlay, 4 connector pieces, 2 piping pieces, your accent for your slip pocket, your 4 connector pieces, or these are for the rolled handles actually, 2 of your mid flaps backed with Decovil Light, your bottom piece I have backed with Peltex, as well as your lining piece. All my lining pieces are backed with EB Fuse medium woven interfacing. Your 2 lining side panels and your 2 exterior side panels backed with Decovil Light. Your 2 exterior main panels with Decovil Light and your 2 lining panels with your woven interfacing. Your 2 front zipper pocket lining pieces, your slip pocket piece, your exterior slip pockets, exterior and lining, your interior zipper pocket lining pieces. Okay, so I'm going to prep all of my items that I'm going to have to do edge paint on so I can get that paint drying. So you're going to take your 2 main flap pieces. I'm using some double-sided tape and I'm going to stick these wrong sides together. I've also added just a small square of Peltex here because my turn lock, I don't think my vinyl is going to be thick enough to hold my turn lock, so just adding that piece there is just going to give it a little bit more for the screws to grab into. Okay, so stick them as even as you can, wrong sides together. If they're not perfect, that's okay. We are going to trim this up a little bit, but try to get as close as you possibly can. And then we're going to top stitch all the way around with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, just like so. And this is where we can even up. We're going to even up the seam to approximately 1/8 inch, and it's going to make our sides all even and have a nice smooth surface for doing our edge paint. Okay, so that's all done. Now I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to use my Giardini edge paint. So I'm going to do 3 to 4 coats of my base coat, a coat of a black color, and then my glossy top coat. I do not show that in this tutorial, but I do have a class on how to edge paint down in the description below. Okay, we are going to do a similar thing with our middle flap section, but first we want to install the male piece of our magnetic snap on one side of our main flap, or our center flaps. So just go ahead and install your magnetic snaps. I like to put a small scrap of Decovil Heavy in behind the prongs just to give it a little more security, as this will be opened and closed quite a bit. I also like to put just a small scrap of duct tape over the prongs just to give it a little more security and to make sure those prongs are not going to rub on the other side of the flap. So just like we did with the main flap, I'm going to use double-sided tape to stick these wrong sides together and then go ahead and do a 1/4 inch top stitch, and again go ahead and trim that down to 1/8 inch seam allowance to get it ready for edge painting. Okay, so I'm going to take our 2 flap pieces, my zipper overlay and my slip pocket accent piece, and I'm going to go ahead and edge paint those and do the rest of the bag while these dry. Okay, so now let's work on our rolled handles. Now I'm doing this slightly different because I do not have the cording of the right size that is listed, and I really want to do rounded corners. So I'm kind of winging it here. I'm taking 2 pieces of 1/4 inch cording. This is just a cotton cording. I will put a link down below where I buy this. I do get it at Cleaner Supply. So I cut these to 12 inches, which is a little bit longer than what the cording is in the pattern. From the short end of the strap here, I'm just matching at that 1/2 inch mark so I can find my center mark and draw a line down the middle. And then I'm going to measure in 2 3/4 inches from that short side. And this is just going to help me center my cording in between these marks, because we don't want the cording to go all the way to the end. Okay, so now I'm going to take some double-sided tape down that center, and this is going to help us hold that cording in place while we sew. So go ahead and center our 12-inch cording strips in between those lines. And do the same with the other piece. I'm hopeful that this just gives us a thicker rounded handle, and actually in the end it did. Sometimes you just got to go with what you have on hand. Okay, so now we're going to take the F2 pattern pieces and we're going to put them out. Now, the reason I made my cording a little bit longer is because I want to be able to sew through it, so I know that those ends are going to be enclosed and not fray, because I am using a cotton cording. So I'm going to take these pieces and put them wrong sides together, matching up the edges, and I want it to just overlap that cording by 1/4 inch or so. And do the same with the other side. Okay, and then I'm just going to go ahead and top stitch all around this area here with 1/4 inch seam allowance, and that is going to help hold the cording in place, like you can see here. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I am going to measure up 1/2 inch from each side. I'm going to take some double-sided tape again and put it along that long edge, and I'm going to fold those raw edges into that line that we just drew. And if you don't want to use the double-sided tape, you can definitely use clips to hold this in place. Okay, and then we're going to fold this in half upon itself. Again, you can use clips. I'm using some more tape just because it's really easy to hold this in place, and I do have an industrial, so it has no issues getting through the stickiness. So then fold those folded edges together like so, enclosing our cording. And then I'm going to take this to my machine using a zipper foot. I'm going to go and do an eighth of an inch top stitch along that folded edge, and then a 1/4 of an inch top stitch next to that, as close to the cording as it can be, without going through the cording. Okay, so that's done. You can see how it's given us a rounded effect. I have my 2 lines of top stitching, and I went ahead and I just did some Giardini edge coat all around those raw edges on the end. And you can see it gives us our short little rounded handles. Okay, so now let's do our piping. This piping, I bought this cording from Galaxy Customs. I will leave a link down below where I got it. It's the first time I have used this kind of piping. I usually use the cotton piping, and this piping did not disappoint. It gave such a nice crisp shape to the bag. So I measured in from each side as per the pattern, and I'm taking my cording and I'm going to stick it to my tape down that center line to hold it in place. And then I'm going to take some more double-sided tape. Again, you can use clips. And then we're going to stick the long raw sides together, enclosing that cording in the center. You will do the exact same thing with the other piping piece. Now in the pattern, she just leaves it like this and doesn't sew. I like to go ahead and just sew it in place to make sure it all stays. So I will go ahead and do a long stitch with my zipper foot as close to the cording as I can at a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. If you need a more in-depth class on piping, I do have that down below. Okay, so the front panel, let's do the zippers. So I have my front panel here. I'm on the wrong side, and I am going to just draw from the template the zipper cutout here. Flip it over and do the other side. So it should almost look like a V shape. Okay, then I'm going to measure in 3/8 of an inch from each side of those rectangles. And then a halfway mark, which is approximately a 1/4 of an inch in between those short lines, just like we do whenever we do a zipper pocket, and then do your V's out to the corner. Okay, so now I want to find the center of these rectangles, which is approximately 3 inches, and I am going to mark this with a pin only in the areas where we will be cutting this away, because we don't want to put any holes in our vinyl. So you only want to make sure the pin is going through the vinyl where we will be cutting. And this is to help us find the center and our placement for our zipper lining when we flip this over to the other side. So find your center of your zipper pocket lining. And then I'm just going to draw a 1 inch from the top there. They also have a marking on the pattern piece if you want to use that. I'm going to find my pin that I have sticking there and move this up approximately 1 inch above where that zipper will be placed. Hold it with clips until I can flip it over, and then secure the lining piece through where we will be cutting it away. So the reason we want it to be 1 inch higher than the where we're going to be cutting it is we need to have some material to sew the pocket shut later. So we're going to go ahead, take this to the machine, and sew around this rectangle. So that is done. And just as we do any zipper pocket, we are going to cut it away here to our short lines and into the V's without cutting our stitching. And then we're going to pull that lining pocket, which is right sides together, through the hole, so our wrong sides are now together. And then you're going to take this to the iron and give it a good press. You could also use some double-sided tape if your machine can handle it to base this in place. Okay, so that is all done. Now I'm going to take one of my 7-inch zippers. I always use double-sided tape when I'm doing my zippers. Again, you can just hold the zipper in place. Now you want to make sure your zipper is orientated the right way so it closes to the top of the bag. So make sure you double check that. And then position your zipper centered in that hole. And then we're going to go ahead and top stitch this in place once we have it where we want it to be with the 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I will take you over to the machine to show you how I do this. Okay, so I am pulling my threads long because I don't want to have that ugly backstitch mark here because it is the front of the bag and it will be visible. So I pulled my stitches long without backstitching. Okay, so I'm just pulling on my bobbin thread from the start to pull my top thread through and through to the back. And as I come back to the start point, I want my needle to land in my exact same stitch. So I'm going to just kind of hand crank it and make sure my needle is going right down in the same hole that my stitch started. Pull my threads along, holding onto those threads to not lose them, tugging at that bobbin thread to pull the top thread through, and then I am going to tie them up with 3 to 4 knots to hold them in place. And this just gives a nice seamless top stitch to that zipper pocket. Okay, so now we're going to close up our pocket. So you're going to fold the lining right sides together here and secure with clips. Now sewing up this one is a little different than normal because we want to kind of follow the shape of the bag because this is a rectangular pocket, but the bag is not rectangular. So I'm going to kind of fold back the exterior here, and within a 1/2 inch from where the exterior would lie, I'm going to start my stitching there. So we're going to have an odd shaped pocket here. And then pivot to get to the top of the zipper. I like to back stitch over top of the zipper teeth just to make it have a little more security. Across that top section, this is where we left that 1 inch extra fabric so we'd have something to sew. Come down the other side and follow the shape of the bag again. Okay, so now we are going to trim up those seam allowances to about 1/4 of an inch. So you can see how we followed the shape of the bag, and you want to make sure the lining pieces stay outside of the seam allowances of the exterior. We are working with 1/4 of an inch seam allowance for the majority of this bag. So go ahead and do the exact same thing with the other pocket. So there we go. We have that all done. Now we are going to place our magnetic snap for our center flap section. So on the pattern piece, you're going to see all these markings. Make sure you are using the correct marking for the snap we are using. We are doing the front main magnetic snap placement. So I'm just going to the back side and using my pattern piece as a guide to where to place this. And then I'm going to install my female snap here. Making sure to back it with a piece of Decovil Heavy again, or Peltex, just to make sure that we have that security. Okay, so that is done there. Again, I back it with a piece of duct tape just to keep it from the prongs for rubbing the other material that'll be on the back side. We also at this point want to install our male part of our thumb lock. So again, we're using our pattern piece. Make sure you choose the right one. Fold your pocket pieces out of the way so you're not cutting them by accident. Make sure your placement is good because we want them to line up perfectly. Make your mark. And then go ahead and install that male piece as per the manufacturer's instructions of your thumb lock. Okay, so that's done, and I've done Decovil Heavy again behind the washer and just putting a piece of duct tape there to secure that. So that is done. Okay, so you can see how beautiful the edge paint looks on this. It's all nice and glossy and shiny. I just love it. So now we want to do our female thumb lock piece on this main flap. So you're going to use your flap piece. Keep in mind we have cut away about 1/8 of an inch from each side of the seam allowance here. So you want to make sure this is pretty centered with about 1/8 of an inch of the pattern piece overhanging on the top and the bottom raw edges here. And I'm going to make just my center mark right here. And that is going to be where my placement will be, where I will punch my hole through. Okay, so I like to use this medium blue thread locker for my screws of my thumb lock, just because this will be opening and closing and I do not want those screws to come loose. So this just helps keep them in place. So I have my lock installed here and I am just going to screw it in place on the wrong side. My screwdriver is just a little screwdriver from the dollar store. It is nothing fancy. Okay, so I'm just going to make sure it all goes in well. Looks good. Okay, so now we are going to work on another magnetic snap of our exterior slip pockets. So the lining piece, you want to use your pattern piece again for the placement of your magnetic snap. So this is the female side magnetic snap, or sorry, the male side. I always put some fray check when I am cutting into a cotton. This is just to make sure it doesn't fray later on. So just on those 2 slits I just made, I will add a little bit of fray check. And then I'll go ahead and install my male snap. And again, put my duct tape on the other side. All right, and then we're going to take the exterior of that slip pocket piece and put them right sides together, clip them across the top. And then we're going to go ahead to take this to the machine and sew just this top curvy part with 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, now I'm going to take my pinking shears. You can also just do little notches. This is just to get a really nice curve to this bag, or to this piece. Because now we are going to turn these wrong sides together and we are going to finger press this seam nice and taut and secure it with clips. And then we're going to take this to the machine and top stitch it with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance and baste down the other 3 raw edges. Just hold everything in place. Okay, so that is all done. I have marked my center of my back exterior piece. Oh, wait, I'm getting ahead of myself. We want to put the female portion of the magnetic snap here. So again, you're going to use your main panel piece. You are on the back side of the bag now. Make sure you're finding the corresponding mark for the back panel and make a mark where we're going to put our female snap. And go ahead and install the female end of this slip pocket piece. Okay, so that's done. I have my centers marked of my main panel piece and my slip pocket piece. I have snapped the magnetic snap in place to make sure it lines up good. And we are going to baste around all three sides like we have here, and that is complete. Now we want to work on our flap placement. So we're going to start with the center flap. You're going to measure 2 inches down from the top of the main panel and make a line. And we want to make sure our centers match. So we are putting, our main flap is going to be right side up. So you want your magnetic snap to be facing down. I'm going to find a center and just mark it with chalk. Make sure it is centered. We want our pieces to all line up perfectly with the front side. I'm going to measure 1 inch up from each side from the bottom straight side and mark it with my Choco. And on the underside, I'm going to use some double-sided tape along that straight edge, and this is what's going to hold it in place while I sew this. So I'm going to place this centered along that 2-inch line that we just drew. And I'm going to double check that I am indeed center, which I am. And then I'm going to top stitch right along our other top stitching from that 1 inch mark down here across the bottom and up to that other 1 inch mark, just following the same stitching we did when we top stitched it originally. Okay, so that's what we have here. Now we're going to do something very similar with the main flap piece. So we want to mark in 1/2 inch from the left and the right sides, 2 inches down. So there's my 1/2 inch mark. And I'm also going to make a 2-inch line. And this is going to give us a guide for the placement of our main flap. So on the wrong side of our main flap, we are going to put some double-sided tape on those 2 straight edges. And then stick those down, lining them up with the markings that we just made for their placement. And just like we did for the middle flap, we are going to measure 1 inch up from each of those sides. And we are going to sew them on in the same fashion we did with the middle flap. So just between those 1 inch sides and along the bottom there. And I'm just using my lighter to melt the edges of my bonded thread. Okay, so I went ahead and also added some rivets just for a little extra security on those flaps and for some decoration. I'm going to put my main panels wrong sides together just to make sure everything lines up properly, and they do. And I went ahead and I installed my nameplate in the bottom right corner. Okay, so now we are going to work on the connectors. So these are for our invisible connectors. So I'm going to chain stitch these just to save on some thread. So I'm using my double-sided tape down the center of all of them. And I'm going to fold the long sides of each of these into that center line that we drew. Just like how we make any connector. Then I'll take these to the machine, and down each of those folded edges, I'm going to do an 1/8 of an inch top stitch seam allowance. Okay, so now I'm just going to cut them apart and put those aside for now. Now we want to mark on our 2 main panels where we are going to put our exterior hidden connectors. So I've just cut a slit in the pattern piece where these are, and I'm using my erasable pen to mark where I'm going to cut those slits in my vinyl for our hidden connectors. So I have done that. I'm not going to show how I do the hidden connectors on here. I've shown before. I will put a link down below in the description if you need a class on how to do hidden connectors. So go ahead and install your 4 hidden connectors. Okay, so my hidden connectors are complete. I made sure I did not cut through my pocket linings. Okay, so now let's pull out the piping that we created at the beginning of the tutorial. So we want to find the center of our piping and the top and bottom centers of our side pieces, exterior side pieces. So I'm going to line up that center with the bottom center of the side piece and start clipping it around. When you come to the corners, the piping is not going to want to go through because this is vinyl piping. So I'm going to put some small slits to help turn the straight piece into a curvy piece. See how it goes around that corner nicely? And then clip it all the way up. Now you're going to clip it all the way up to where the hard piping ends. And then we're going to take where the piping isn't right in here, and we're going to kind of slide it so it meets the end of our piece like so. And this is going to help veer the piping into the seam allowance. So I'm just going to hold that in place. So when we sew, we're going to be sewing up and over that so it veers into the seam allowance. So go ahead and do this with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. I have gone and put my zipper foot on because this is going to help me get nice and close to that piping and give us the effect that we want. So start at the top of one side, 3/8 of an inch. You're going to have your piping veering off. That's good. So you're going to kind of follow the shape of the side panel, and you can see how my piping is veered off and I'll have no raw edges. And my zipper foot is bringing me nice and close to the piping, so it'll be lovely. So go ahead and do this. You may need a stiletto to help get around the corners. It didn't look like I needed one this time. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and cut my piping tails off here to make it all even with my side panels. And you can see how they veer off into the seam allowance, which is exactly what we want. So now we want to mark, take our pattern piece and mark our magnetic snaps. So we're going to put on each side a male and a female magnetic snap. So one set on each side. And what this does is it gives us what's going to give our bag shape here. Okay, so now it's time to install our purse feet. I do have a class down below in the description on how to do purse feet. I am just going to show you here how I am placing them for this pattern. So I'm finding my centers of my short edges and my long edges, because it's always good to find your centers. And from each end, so each corner, you're going to measure 1.5 inches in and 1.5 inches up. And that is going to be your placement for your purse foot. And then one in the very center, and then same with the other side. So go ahead and install your purse feet. Okay, so again, I use duct tape just to protect my prongs. Now we're going to take this piece with our front main panel, put them right sides together, match up those center marks, clip it in place, and then we are going to sew this on with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And now what we're going to do is you can just finger press this. You know me, I always take my double-sided tape to help me get a nice tight seam. And I am going to push the seam towards the bottom of the bag. And then we're going to top stitch through the bottom of the bag to hold that seam in place. Okay, so I've done that with both sides, and now we are going to install our sides. So you're going to match up the short side center of the bottom piece with the bottom center of the side piece, and then you're going to match up the sides, the top sides of the main exterior and the side piece. And then you're going to evenly distribute your fabric all the way down and around that curve. And we're going to go ahead with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. And I'm actually just going to use the stitching from when we put the piping on as a guide to where I'm going to stitch this on. And then you'll do the exact same thing with the other side. Keep your zipper foot still on so you can get nice and close to that seam allowance. Okay, so this kind of gives you an idea of what the exterior of our bag is going to look like, and all of our snaps and our turn locks match up, which makes me very happy. So now what we want to do is we want to just prep this for the drop-in lining. If I did this pattern again, I would have made these marks on my exterior pieces beforehand, before sewing them together, but that's okay. So what you want to do is from the top of the bag, you want to measure in 3/4 of an inch and just draw a line on all of the exterior panels on the wrong side. So now we are going to take some double-sided tape once that's done, put it along that line we just drew, and then we are going to fold all of the raw edges of the top of this bag down to that line and get it nice and ready for when we do the drop-in lining. I am also going to use clips to hold it in place because I don't know if my tape will hold it down for the whole time while I do my lining pieces. So I'm going to fold it down to that line like so. So this is folding in about a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then I'm just going to use clips just to make sure it doesn't pop out of place. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and do our lining pieces. I already did my slip pockets and my exterior pockets. I do have classes down below how I do those, so I will remember to put the link down below in the description for you. So you are going to attach this in the exact same fashion that we did the exterior of our bag. So you're going to do our bottom pieces first with a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance along the bottom. But when it comes to the side pieces, you're going to start at 3/8 of an inch. And as you get down closer to the bottom, you're going to work your way around to 5/8 of an inch and then back up to 3/8 of an inch. And this is just going to give us a nice tight lining in our bag because it'll be slightly smaller than the exterior of the bag. And I also went ahead and drew that 3/4 of an inch line here before sewing the pieces for when it comes to base these down. Okay, so you can see I have done that. The exterior and lining are both done and ready for drop-in lining. Do not be scared of this part. It is actually fairly easy, and you don't have to turn the bag out, which is nice. So place your lining into your exterior piece, wrong sides together. Match up the 4 side seams here. Make sure your lining piece and your exterior pieces are matched up nice and even on top because we are going to top stitch this. So go ahead and do that all the way around the whole bag, matching up those folded edges nice and perfect with one another. Use lots of clips to make sure these stay in place. Take your time with this. You want your placement to be perfect. Okay, so I'm actually going to take this to my cylinder arm, but if I was doing this on my flatbed, you could have done this inside out, so the exterior was on the inside and you could top stitch. I would just make sure my bobbin thread was good and top stitch it from the inside of the bag so you don't have to squish the bag under the machine. I'm just going to take this to my cylinder arm, which is why I bought him, was for these drop-in linings, and he's going to make my life so much easier. So let's top stitch this with 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So now you just want to go around the seam and make sure all of the raw edges got caught and there are none exposed. I am good here. And then all that's left to do is to install your handles, which I have riveted on. And then this bag is complete.
All right, that's it. That's false. Oh, see, it was not a hard pattern to make, and it has such a designer look to it. I'm just in love with it, and I think this is going to be a really good seller. So I hope you guys really enjoyed this tutorial. I hope it was helpful. I hope it inspires you to go and get this pattern. I would love to see your makes of this on my Facebook page. I will have all of that linked down below so you know where to join my bag makers community. And again, if you would like to support my channel, you can always buy me a coffee. That link's down below. Not mandatory, of course. But yeah, this is the Derica Handbag by Tobi Stylx. So I will catch you guys on the next one. Bye!